Behind me is the Gwynn Falls. Runs north to south, and it's also the first major headache and milestone for the B&O Railroad. We're going to get into that story in this episode and the next installment of From Mount Clare, heading out all the way to Rosebee's Rock and covering how did the B&O make its way from Baltimore out to the Ohio River Valley. Stay tuned. This is going to be a fun one for you. So the year is 1828. Now, at this point, the first stone has already been laid, and the current president, Philip E. Thomas of the B&O Railroad, is saying, all right, guys, it's time to continue to move out west. We've started at Mount Clare. We've laid the first stone. It's time to go. And so a series of events are going to occur before we get to this guy behind me. And those events are, there's a Army, it's not the Army Corps of Engineers, but it's they're employed by the Army. Some of them are officers, some of them are civilians. But there's three main ones that we want to talk about. And that's a guy named Jonathan Knight. There's a Lieutenant Colonel Whistler of Whistler's mother's fame. And there's also a Captain McNeil. These three gentlemen are sent on a fact-finding mission to merry old England to find out how bridges are actually made and put together, and more importantly, how railroads are done, since the country of England had already had railroads in place for a little bit longer than the U.S. The Stockton and Darlington, and the other one, the something in Manchester. I'm blanking on that one at the moment. But so these three guys, McNeil, Whistler, and Knight, head out to England to do their mission. And so in their surveying, they figure out that stone arches, like the one behind me, are the way to go. Now, are they costly? Oh yeah, they cost some dinero. But they are designed in a fashion to which they can support more load and last longer than a wooden bridge, which was at the time the alternative. So the board of directors was, the B&O was kind of like, let's go with the wooden stuff. That's El Cheapo. That's what we'd like. But no, what ended up happening was Philip E. Thomas, he was probably coerced, perhaps. That's an assumption on my part. But in the Dilt's book, he kind of hints at that, the James D. Dilt book. And he points out that Philip E. Thomas signed off on stone bridges to get out to Ellicott Mills. That's the first 13 miles. And so what will happen now is these three gentlemen, Knight, McNeil, and Whistler, will come back from England, from their survey, and say, all right, guys, we figured out stone bridges are the way to go. So how do we move forward? Well, the first big, large body of water and or obstacle they have to get past is the Gwynn Falls behind me. Again, flows north to south. And how do they get over this? Well, Knight finds a guy named Caspar Weaver. He might be a friendly ghost, I don't know. But Caspar, we'll just call him Weaver, or Weaver, however you say his last name. Weaver comes through and says, okay, he assumes the position because of Knight talking to the board, and he assumes the position of superintendent of construction. And so he begins the process of the Carrollton Viaduct behind me. So he's the one that is going to oversee all of this. The contractor, there's two really involved here, a guy named James Lloyd and another one named John McCartney. And Lloyd will get into he'll have some financial squabbles later down the road, and McCartney is more known as a hard-drinking, but hard-working contractor. So Lloyd and McCartney began the process, and what I find to be absolutely amazing is that the arch you see behind me was not the first arch, though. It's not the first stone arch. There's actually a smaller one further east, not too far east. We're not going to go in and see that because it's in a, we'll call it an undesirable location, and it's really overgrown and it's hard to see. But this is the first major arch at the B&O as they headed west. So this is the view you would get heading north on the trail. And I am getting ready to walk in front of this thing. Well, I am in front of it, who am I kidding? It is just a sight to behold. Look at this. Something I want to point out, a couple things actually. So the original arch right here, let's get you in a better spot. The original arch was actually meant to be, actually that's a worse spot. There we go. The original arch, let me keep moving here. The original arch, aha, Yahtzee, I win. The original arch here was planned to be 40 feet from end to end here. The inside was supposed to be 40 feet. And that was, so there were mills, textile mills, flour mills, mills in general, north of here, this location. And the owners of these said, well, this Gwynn Falls, excuse me, is prone to flooding at times. And so we don't think 40 feet's enough. And so the contractors came in and they said, so this would be, well, Weber had his sway with Philip E. Thomas, and he was able to coerce Thomas and the others to sign off on 80 feet wide, which is what it is now, 80 feet inside to inside. So in order to help with the potential flooding that would go on from the Gwynn Falls. And so also there was another issue which was coming in. Now, building structures like this was kind of a newfangled thing here. They had learned a lot of this, as we talked about earlier, from trips to England. And so where you see here the base of this stuff where it goes into the ground, they built cofferdams around this. And cofferdams are just big structures that you put around the foundation of something like that. And you, in this time frame, you would have probably used buckets to get all the water out. And that way you had a dry area to work in and lay the foundation for this thing. They may have used very primitive, maybe hand wound pumps, don't know. But anyway, the point is cofferdams are meant to enclose the foundation or the pre-foundation and then allow you a dry area in which to work in. So let's go back here and point out. So this here would have been enclosed with a cofferdam, and then once that, you can see the base structure, actually you can see it better over here. Once that would have been put in place and poured and firmed up, then they could have started building this. And fun fact is all the granite, so this is granite, this whole thing is done with granite. The whole thing, the granite came from two quarries, one in Ellicott's Mills and the other one up at Port Deposit in Harford County. And so that is pretty neat. And there's some details I do like, and we'll get closer on this side to see. But there's pilasters here that come up and down. They're very decorative. If you go in there and look, they're almost like the turrets, if you will. And but this was, you got to remember something too. We have to keep this in mind when we look at this structure. This was designed back in the time where before, so we know our B&O history. Tom Thumb doesn't come along until roughly the steam locomotive doesn't come along until 1829, 1830. So this was being built when they were still using horses and light wooden cars in order to pull that stuff across to get out west, and that was their idea. They knew steam was coming because England already had very primitive steam engines working in mines and other areas. So they knew steam was coming, but this was rated to hold, and if I remember correctly, and if not, I'll put something here, 1,500 tons is what this is rated at. Hence why you can, CSX nowadays can still run their massive 6-axle GE and EMD diesels over this thing. It's just phenomenal, the engineering involved. All right, so I moved up the embankment here. So this was put in place. Again, this is somewhere between 15 to 16. The numbers kind of vary. At some point, somebody will get a tape measure out and do the deed. But this was originally designed as a throughway for the mills on the other side. So there was already a road, if you will, that was still kind of in place here. And so this was designed so that way they could still move their goods going along that road, and the railroad could move their goods this way. So why don't we walk through that and get an idea here. Plus that'll get us closer to this actual granite itself. So this was designed again for, now obviously you can see, let me stop myself here. So this has been obviously renovated and they've put this over here for a bike trail that comes through. But the original stone itself, and that's actually brickwork, so that may have already been, it was kind of a, yeah, the original granite's up here. So that's the original opening. I don't know if you can see that. There's the original right there. Obviously it was scaled probably down a little bit more. So the granite ends just about here, and there's a brick arch, and then they put this steel in place here, steel, corrugated steel. So kind of a neat design in the fact that this was meant for, yeah, so actually, you know what, let's go back. You can see it better here. This is obviously, you see down the bottom, this is modern brick. Modern. This is, I can just kind of look at it, tell this is a bit older. And then this was the original arch here, these granite blocks. I mean, just look at this. This is just phenomenal. Phenomenal. This was built in 1829. And it still can hold these huge 6-axle diesels that occasionally come over this thing on the 4Runner track. Mind-blowing. I want to add one more thing here before I move on to the next location. But this was actually, and you could look at, if you look at photographs, I want to say post 1930s, all the way up until the early, I think it's 2005, if I'm not mistaken, 2005. This was actually all filled with silt, dirt, and other stuff. It just filled all with, you could barely see the opening, and so they came in and moved all that out, and they created this beautiful bike trail that you can take, and it's a hiking trail as well. Trust me, it goes up and down. But yeah, so this, and look at any photograph, this was filled all the way to the top, and I find that kind of neat that they were able to use this as part of a bike trail, you know, get people out and moving. All right, so I've moved to the north side of the viaduct here, and here's a pretty good shot of those pilasters, almost like mini turrets. Absolutely beautiful. And the B&O wonder, I'm sure the board of directors said, do we really need this? Here's a, we'll get in closer here. I want you to kind of get an idea. Look at that. It's the original foundation for this thing. And these granite blocks are just utterly amazing to look at. So I've moved to the north side of the bridge here. Something that we want to continue with the story is, again, Casper Weber is the superintendent of this entire project. he hires our two friends, McCartney and Lloyd. And James Lloyd is the one that's actually going to go on the cornerstone of this, which if you look, you can't really see, but it's going to be in this direction here. I actually got, I'll segue just for 2 seconds here. I actually got lucky in the making of this video in the fact that over the weekend at the B&O Railroad Museum, we had to return a locomotive that we had borrowed for an event to CSX. And so that Saturday, I had to go out and babysit this thing and sit and wait while CSX showed up. And we take it out to our west end, and it sits on the D-rail, or sits at the D-rail location, the interchange where we go into CSX. And so I had a chance to go in and kind of do a little bit of exploring, and I happened to find the cornerstone of this. And sure enough, it's a little hard to read, but James Lloyd's name's on it, and it has the date, and I think that's pretty fantastic. So I'll leave it at that. We'll continue with this story. So McCartney's the one, he brings in all the lumber and the cribbing to make the center arch, right? So they're going to form that in order to begin the process of putting the masonry on top, sorry, the stone on top, and then once the mortar dries, then they can remove that cribbing and all the forms, and now you have yourself a finished product. Well, fact check, false. That's not true. Actually, in this time frame, and prior to 1829, 1830, bridges that were built out of stone and whatnot were actually held together by just this single thing called a keystone. Let me flash a photo up on the screen for you. And so see the circled part there? That's the keystone. And that stone helps to basically lock, as the name implies, a key, locks in all the other stones and essentially kind of distributes the weight. So once that locks in, and once that is the last piece, then all that cribbing and the forms, the wooden forms that went in the framing that went to make the arch, can then be removed. I hope you learned something from this. Let's get back to the video. So, and Dilts points this out in the book a couple times, is that there always seems to be as with most large projects, a kind of a struggle between Weaver, whatever we want to call him, and Lloyd and McCartney. They're all kind of battling for this. And then there's also this struggle at the top where the directors and President Philip E. Thomas is saying, yeah, I don't know about this stone stuff, man. This is going to cost us some money. I think we need to go to the wooden, let's go to a wooden trestle. But Weaver, his bread and butter was stone arches. And Weaver got his start actually helping Knight on the National Road. He had done multiple projects with Knight and was kind of his underling. He was not a certified engineer of any sorts, but he had done multiple projects again on the National Road, where he was learning how to form these things, how to construct them, and more so how to manage contractors like Lloyd and McCartney. And so some neat stuff to point out is, so the archway behind me, once it was completed, was actually done for, as we know, the double track main line that was going to come out of Mount Clare. And at this point in time, if you go up there now, which you shouldn't because that's called trespassing, but if you were to go up there and look, although certain parts you can kind of get access to, just don't go on CSX's main line. It's not their main line, it's the Forerunner, which is the part that goes around. But my point is, if you were to go up there now, you'd see it's a single track line that goes through, but you can, it's really neat, as again, when I was babysitting this engine, I got to see this. You can see where the tracks would have been double tracked all the way through. And the fact that this thing is still standing after being completed in December of 1829 is utterly fascinating. So materials were kind of hauled in. So let's go back and timeline-wise here. The materials were hauled in May of 1828. The construction really didn't start until November, December timeframe of 1828. And cool fact, our friend, Charles Carroll of Carrollton, actually came in and put the last stone, probably not physically because the man was 90 years old, but he came in and he ceremoniously put the last stone in place for this. And they named it after him, obviously, the Carrollton Viaduct. I think that's fascinating. That just is amazing to me. So this trail, though, is still accessible. You can still come down here and see some of this. And when we go to other footage here, you'll see that there's a good way. You can bicycle through here. You can take hikes through here. There's actually a guy on the other side of the camera further down who's doing some cleaning up of brush and whatnot. So people still really care about this area. And again, see, it's not the B&O's main line, and CSX certainly doesn't use it as that anymore, but it is still a functioning bridge, stone arch, that is just a marvel of technology. All right, so I've moved back to my original location here, and I want to point out a few dimensions. So, like we said before, inside to inside here of the arch, the internals of the arch is 80 feet, and it is 51 from the base here, just above the granite, all the way up to the top here at the parapet. And the whole thing, from end, which is tucked way back in that tree patch, all the way to here where it runs to here, is just over 300 feet. And I think it's pretty neat to also point out, and I'll share this to you, is that originally they had a walkway up top. So both sides have a walkway right here. And that was so when trains would stop there, and if there was a crew change or something like that, or they had to get out and inspect, the freight cars or what have you, they're having an issue. That was so the conductor or brakeman could get down and walk on either side of the train and, well, not fall into the Gwynn Falls, because that wouldn't be good. And I will say this, and this is why I'm always humbled as I come here. I just think these guys back in the day, the building this, maybe they do, maybe they didn't, probably didn't, that this would stand the test of time. It's still here. How many years later? I mean, we're coming up on almost, my math, 200 years. Yeah, coming up on 200 years. Again, completed December of 1829. And it's now, May of it's almost June of 2025. So we're coming up on 200 years. That's pretty epic. Just insane to think about. And it's a couple other little fun facts for you. Go back to something I always love to talk about, are presidents. Andrew Jackson was the first president to ride across this. Oh yeah. Now, love him or hate him, he was the first. And this is one of the most also iconic ones, stone viaducts here, because others have been demolished over time, but this one is still in use. Again, not that often. It's very rare that you see CSX come through on their, what they call the forerunner track, and pull a train through here. But it's still an epic piece of history that you can go see. The never-ceasing, unrelenting flow of the Gwynn Falls is kind of a storyline for the B&O. It's how they got out to the Ohio River Valley long before the C&O Canal did. I hope you learned something out of this video. Hopefully you make a trip out here to come see the Carrollton Viaduct. Yeah, you can't ride over it anymore. But you can, again, you could take your bike through that stone archway. You can do a hiking trail. By all means, come out here, explore history, find history, and more importantly, make your own history. This is Trevor from History on the Move, and I will see you next time on this journey when we head further out west on the B&O's old main line.